Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I'm Hub Arkush, along with my co-hosts every week, Kyle Nabors, of course, our group sports editor at Shaw Media, and Sean Hammond, the beat reporter for the Chicago Bears for ShawLocal.com and Bears Insider. And guys, day two of training camp. Sean and I are joining you from Hallis Hall. We're in different parts of the building right now, trying to get feedback from each other as we talk into each other's microphones. But we've been sitting next to each other for the last 48 hours trying to figure out what's going on here. And a lot more news, I guess, than most people expected for a team going through a complete rebuild that many expect to be competing more for a top five draft choice than anything else. But I guess we start there, guys. The big news, of course, started to break about 24 to 36 hours before camp when it leaked that Roquan Smith had decided not to participate in practice or workouts. We assume until he gets a contract extension or at least has some kind of understanding with the Chicago Bears. The tradition was Tuesday morning. Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus sat together as the Bears GM and head coach do every year at the start of the camp. And Ryan addressed it right off the top, said, I'm sure you've heard what's going on. I'm not going to get into any negotiations or any contract talk about Roquan. We're going to keep all that quiet, but he is here. He has reported. We have since found out from Matt Eberflus that he is attending meetings. He is watching film. He's just not working on the field. Sean, at the beginning of each practice, day one on basically Wednesday, day two on Thursday, which is when we're recording for you now. We saw him out on an exercise bike out on the field where the injured players usually are. And then they announced after, I believe, yesterday's practice that he had been placed on PUP, on the physically unable to perform list. And let's get that out of the way right away. Technically, is it against the rules if he's not hurt? Yeah, you could make that argument. No team, to my knowledge, and I've actually inquired with some people at the league office, has ever been asked to provide a physical or proven injury. The PUP list gets used for various reasons all the time. And the reason that Roquan Smith is on the PUP list is that there is no question or concern while he's on that list about putting him on the field to practice. He can't while he's on the PUP list. There was a lot of misinformation in social media on Twitter that they had to do that so they couldn't find him. That is not true. As soon as he reported, they were unable to find him. They can't force him to be on the practice field. But nonetheless, it's obviously, Sean, an agreement between Roquan and the team that that's the best way to try and keep this quiet and not have it be a 24/7 conversation amongst everybody on the team, everybody in the media, and to try and keep it from blowing up in social media and talk radio and everywhere else.
Yeah, Hub, you're right. I mean, I think they have some, they clearly have come to some sort of agreement on that and talked about this ahead of time and why. And that's why Roquan is on that PUP list. And, a guy who's been in the league now for 4 years, I'm sure he's got all sorts of bumps and bruises that he could say that he's feeling when he shows up to camp, because he's been through this a few times, and he's faced his fair share of injuries over the years. But yeah, we all know what this is really about, and I imagine that once they do get a contract worked out, if they do get a contract worked out, he's going to be feeling a lot better physically.
Kyle, there's all kinds of examples you can find. I was intrigued by seeing the Packers PUP list the other day. You've got David Bakhtiari on the PUP list. You've got Elgton Jenkins. You got a bunch of players that had off-season surgeries. We don't know if they're actually still unable to perform or not. They're just trying to bring them along slowly. So it doesn't have to be a specific traumatic injury to land a guy on the PUP list. I think that was the initial intention of creating this designation in this list, but it's used for these purposes all the time. So the conspiracy theorists don't have to worry. It's not that. They're not trying to make up an injury. They're not trying to fool anybody. It just seems to be the most comfortable place to keep them right now.
Yes, it's certainly not the first time an NFL team has put a player on the PUP list in this type of a situation where I guess the entertaining part of it, I'm going to use the word charade, and I don't want that to seem negative because it's not, but it was entertaining listening to the conversation between you guys yesterday and Matt Eberflus, because everyone knows what's happening here. But, the Bears, and any type of team does this, they're not going to just poke the NFL in the eye and make it obvious. They're going to do what they can to try and make it seem legitimate at least. But it's kind of funny. But to me, I thought it was a good move. I don't know about you guys, but it kind of kills the with him in the building every day, it kind of blunts, I guess, the questions about where the contract status is. I'm sure that they'll still come up, but it makes it seems at least that it's going to slow things down in terms of trying to get something done, in terms of the pressure, the outside pressure that is.
What's really interesting about it, guys, and I'm not going to go too deep because I'm actually writing about it now for tomorrow's papers, and I guess we'll have it posted later today or tomorrow. But it speaks to the greater strategy of what rookie general manager Ryan Poles and rookie head coach Matt Eberflus are trying to accomplish here. The myriad decisions that they have to make that they believe are in the best interest of the future of the football team, not necessarily right now or this season or even next season, but how do they take a team that they're tearing down to the studs and rebuild it into a contender? And there's this perception out there that, Roquan Smith just turned 25 in May. He's a two-time second-team All-Pro. He's a top 5 linebackers in the NFL. He's a great football player. Of course you have to re-sign him. I would think you'd want to re-sign him, but no, you don't have to. Strategically, he may be worth more to the Bears rebuilding project in a trade than he would be, by making him one of the 2 or 3, if not the most expensive linebackers in the NFL. And what's ironic about it to me, Sean, is that it's really almost an identical situation to the one the Raiders found themselves in 5 years ago when they traded Khalil Mack to the Chicago Bears. Khalil Mack was I believe, a year older and probably a little bit more accomplished. I think he had a defensive MVP award, but we're talking about close to the same tier, same categories, and we know the King's ransom the Bears paid. And there are some folks who will still debate which team got the better of that deal. So as much as when you add with Roquan the fact that he has such high character, that he's such a great leader, he's such a bright and quality young man, a guy you want in every locker room. It seems like, of course, you got to find a way to sign him. But Ryan Poles has got a chance to do something unique here. There is a much bigger picture, and I think he probably needs some of this time to evaluate how he gets the most value out of Roquan and at least eliminate the possibility that a trade doesn't give him more valuable than re-signing him, because it would be like the NFL version of a sign and trade in the NBA. A team making the deal would want to be assured that they had a contract worked out, but that's what happened when the Bears, traded for and signed Khalil Mack. So it can be done. I'm not saying that's where it's going, but I think what is interesting about this is you've read again, there's so much on social media that's either not proven or flat out wrong, but the initial reports suggested that the offers that Roquan had received weren't close to what he expected. We don't know that he's even received an offer. I get a sense, let me rephrase that. It's not that I get a sense. There's a very good possibility that Ryan Poles just wasn't ready to address this yet, because they don't have to. I mean, they can do it up until, I believe it's week 10 or week 12 of the season. They can get to the end of the year and the beginning of free agency. They can franchise him for 1 or 2 or 3 more years. It's not something they have to decide right now. And my sense is that this is where Roquan said, I'd like to know. And he's trying to force their hand. So I don't even know that this is about that they're far apart on a contract so much as they may not have that contract yet. We'll apologize in advance. We are sharing Hallis Hall with a number of folks, and TV broadcasters get a little louder than we do. So hopefully we won't hear much of that, but they're right over Sean's back, so you may hear a little bit of it. I'm sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Well, no, I just really, wanted to agree with you there, Hub. I mean, the urgency is more so on Roquan as far as, he's wanting to see where he stands and where his future is. If you're him, you want to get this deal done as soon as possible. And the Bears don't really have any urgency for that. Like you said, they can use the franchise tag if they need to. And, Roquan's the type of guy who isn't going to need that much time to be prepared for the season. He can come out here a couple of weeks late and still be ready to go come September 11th.
You say that, Sean. And someone earlier, I think it might have been our good friend Rick. Yeah, Rick had said, if Roquan holds out until week 1, how does that affect his learning process of going from the middle to the outside? Hub, do you think that will have a major impact on Roquan's performance, switching to the will linebacker spot if he wasn't to practice at all or participate in these 3 preseason games?
I really don't, because there are, first of all, there's nuance in the Tampa 2 in that while it is a 4-3 base package as opposed to the 3-4 that Vic Fangio brought to Chicago, that's the only defense Roquan's ever played in the NFL. Roquan was not a Mike or a middle linebacker. He was an inside linebacker in a 4 linebacker package. When you look at the way the Tampa 2 is played, as Matt Eberflus pointed out to me way back at the owners' meetings in March, they rarely have the third linebacker on the field. The Sam or strong side linebacker is only on the field for somewhere between 12 and 18% of the snaps. Those are the numbers that Flus gave me. And so even though they're different packages, the style and the way that you play the will or the weak side linebacker in the Tampa 2 is not that different from the style and the way that Roquan was playing as an inside linebacker in a 3-4. Yes, they're different positions. Yes, there's some different responsibilities. But at the end of the day, the type of athlete you're looking for and the effort and smartness you want is not that different. And this was what was so interesting when Matt Eberflus told us yesterday that Roquan is in every meeting. He's in the linebacker room. He's in the team meetings. He's in his playbook. He's not threatening a holdout. He's saying, I don't want to go on the field until my contract status is settled. And for people who don't understand that, I mentioned David Bakhtiari a couple minutes ago because he's on the pup list with the Packers. Here's what can happen in the NFL. Now, Bakhtiari already had his contract. He was the highest paid left tackle in football, may still be. I just haven't looked at contracts that have been done since he signed his about 20 months ago. But he tore an ACL on the final regular, I think it was in practice actually, the final week of the 2020 season. Never returned in 21 until week 17, got 29 snaps and couldn't play in the playoffs. He's now had another procedure during the offseason and is still on the pup list, not able to compete in training camp. Roquan doesn't want to end up with a career-ending injury and never get paid. And I don't know how anybody could not understand that, and even though people, that's not going to happen. Now, it does happen sometimes. I can get you a list of guys that it's happened to. And so it makes perfect sense why Roquan would rather get this settled right now. And I know, and I think Ryan Poles has made clear that he understands that. So there are arguments to be made on both sides. I think both sides have reasonable positions, but I keep coming back to the newness of the management team and the regime here in Chicago. And they're not looking at one player or one season or one training camp. They're trying to find the right ingredients for their complete rebuilding package. And my sense is, maybe they have had some talks and maybe they're not close on money, but that's not really the issue, guys, because if the Bears decide they're going to sign Roquan, we know what he's going to get. He's going to get the Darius Leonard, Fred Warner deal, or at least within a few dollars one way or the other. And Roquan is such a sharp guy. He's going to know it's generational wealth. I don't think he's going to risk, things getting ugly and risk being the bad guy over a couple $1,000,000 if he's getting 130 or 140. To me, this is just more strategic on both sides than anything we've seen so far that suggests that there's any kind of, wedge between the two parties, Kyle.
Yeah, I definitely don't think so. And the fact that he showed up to camp in this fashion makes me think that they are actively working to try and come to a resolution on this. The one thing we talk about, that switch to the Mike to the will linebacker, do you think that actually helps his negotiating stance at all in terms of trying to get up there to that Darius Leonard type money?
Well, I think you know who he is. I mean, he's been a second-team All-Pro the last couple of years. He's one of the leading tacklers and playmakers in the NFL. He's an extremely effective blitzer that people don't realize because he wasn't asked to do it that much in the 3-4. But when he did it very well. And he's one of the best coverage linebackers in football. So, again, it's just more scheme and assignment specific. The one issue he does have, because people are comparing him to Darius Leonard and even going deeper than that to Derek Brooks and Lance Briggs, he is quite a bit smaller than all those guys. Brooks was smaller than Briggs and Leonard. Briggs and Leonard, legit 6'3", 235, 240 guys. I think Brooks was, probably more in the 230 to 235 range where Roquan is. But Brooks, I think, was a couple inches taller than Roquan. So at just over 6 feet and about 230 pounds, he's a little smaller than what you usually see in that spot. But it hasn't hurt him from playing inside, which is theoretically more physically demanding than playing this position, Sean.
Yeah, and I think the TV guys behind me have disappeared, so we're free of distractions here in the background. Just another note too on I guess we're calling it the hold in now. This is kind of a growing trend across the league. Adam Schefter tweeted out last night, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Derwin James are all doing the same thing. These guys are showing up and participating in the meetings and basically doing everything except the on-field work. And, it kind of does make sense, especially for those guys who, in Roquan, I would consider one of those guys who wants to be there for his teammates. He wants to be able to jump right in when he is ready. And I'm kind of with you guys. I think it's just a matter of time. If both sides want to get this done, they're going to get it done in a fairly timely manner. It's just working out the specifics.
Well, and Kyle, here's the other piece of it, because I think Sean just made an excellent point. You look at the guys he mentioned when you talk about DK Metcalf and Derwin James, and of course Roquan and Deebo. Now Deebo's a little different because he got second round money on that rookie deal. The others all got first round money, and so that money, I mean, they've already made their first $15-20 million. And for those of us who are just normal people, we'd say, okay, I'm going to quit. I don't want to get hurt again. But the point is, they don't have the kind of generational wealth that, let's say, a Robert Quinn, who we're going to get to in a couple of minutes, has 3 contracts in. And again, to get to the specifics where all this confusion was about the use of the PUP list, all they needed to do to avoid being signed is show up. And that's why these 4 guys have showed up, because they could very quickly rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines just by missing the first couple of weeks of training camp. And I don't care how much money you have, you don't really want to do that. But especially these rookies who are a little more frugal, and even though they've made incredible money by the standards of most 23, 24, 25-year-old young men in America, they haven't made the money that they're fighting for. And so that's going to be a consideration too. You're also talking about 4 pretty high character guys here. And you're talking about 4 guys who are all smart enough to know the odds are that they're all going to end up staying exactly where they are. And so they don't want to, burn any bridges. They don't want to create any bad feelings or ill will. And so it makes sense now. It comes all the way back to my buddy Adam Schefter, who Sean referenced last night, pointed out this is a trend around the league now, because this is the way to do it, for these kids that want to get paid, before they have any risk of serious injury or something else changing. And it's going to be a story. There's no getting around that. And I don't think anything's going to break real fast. Again, if it was a different guy, you might worry. I mean, if it was a quarterback who needs a homework clause in his contract, you'd be really worried that he might not be ready for the opening of the season. But I think there's some real comfort that however this works out, that come the 49ers on September, whatever it is, that second Sunday in September, that Roquan's going to be ready to go.
I wouldn't be concerned as a Bears fan throughout August. If we get into early September and it's not done, that's when I would start to be concerned, because as we've talked about before, Roquan, as far as we know, still doesn't have an agent. And if you start getting into the season, I guess if he's not playing, he still has time to negotiate. But, that's once you get into the season, I think, or near the beginning of the season, I guess that would be time where I'd start to hit the panic button.
I talked to one GM the other night as we do our usual training camp routine of reconnecting with sources and trying to gather as much information as we can. And he said something very interesting. He said, I lick my chops when I'm negotiating with a player who doesn't have an agent, because obviously I've got a leg up on him. He said, but these are good young men, and even I would tell them, this second contract, this is the most important one. This is usually where you get the biggest bite of the apple, particularly if you're a pretty good young football player, like the quartet that we're talking about here in Roquan and DK and Deebo and Derwin James. And even he said,
sorry, I was going to say, if you're just hearing Derwin James again, he's certainly someone I understand that would want to say, I'm not going to participate in these training camp practices. He's missed 2 years. Is it 2 years of the 4?
Better part of 2 years,
yeah.
About a year and a half, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's still fantastic when on the field, but yeah, it's completely understandable why he would do it.
Yeah, but this is the contract where you do want to milk every penny out of it that you can. And so I don't think anybody begrudges anybody in this thing. And yet, it's a story, because he is, if not the best, one of the 2 or 3 best players on the team. And so we'll continue to follow it for you. But I wouldn't expect anything, in the immediate future. We'll see if something breaks. So, guys, let's actually, before we move on, I want to thank everybody who's with us live today. We apologize, but we are at the mercy of the Bears' schedule if we're going to cover them for you. And in our normal time at 9:30 on Friday mornings, we're getting ready to head out to the practice field. So we're going to try and find the best time for you each week when we're going to record the podcast. If you like being with us, and in order to do that, you just join us through YouTube or through our Twitter accounts. You can go to @Sean_Hammond, @Kyle Nabors, @Hub_Arkush. We'll let you know when we're going. We'll give you plenty of notice a day or two in advance because we love having you here. We're going to get to your comments and questions in a few minutes, and your participation helps us know that we're actually talking about the things that you want to hear. But if you just can't or don't have the time but do like the podcast, of course, we love having you for that as well. And we just want to remind you with that, go to iTunes or the App Store on your phone, or go to shawlocal.com to download a subscription to the podcast so it is automatically delivered to your device each week. And we'll keep you up to speed on when we're recording. And actually, we have most of the training camp schedule, so this may be a time you might want to keep an eye on. We'll see what's going to happen. But the next biggest story, it's no longer, actually, neither one of these are really the biggest story in camp at this point. But then there's the Robert Quinn situation, which, many people were writing him off. Kyle actually stopped me from reporting something the other day, which I had from impeccable sources, and thank God Kyle put the brakes on, because the impeccable sources turned out not to know any more about it than I did. Everything I had heard was that Robert Quinn was not going to report that he did not want to be a Chicago Bear any longer. And yet 10 o'clock Tuesday morning, reporting deadline, Robert Quinn was here as well. We weren't sure what was coming next with him. And there was much speculation in the media room, Sean, on Tuesday that, like Roquan, he wouldn't be practicing either. And we go out there Wednesday morning, and there's number 94 on the field, working and ready to go. And he visited with us at length after practice yesterday and looked around the room as only Robert can and said, "I don't understand. What's the question?" And he acted like it was never really in doubt. And he's surprised that people were concerned. All the sources I was talking to were saying that he did not want to be part of a rebuild, and that it would be understandable at 32, coming off his best season as a pro, to not want to play on a team that may, and I emphasize may, struggle to win 4 or 5 games. They could surprise us. We don't know, but that's kind of what you're looking at right now. But Robert, in his own way, Sean, did everything he could to convince us yesterday that he doesn't want to be anywhere else. And then in the next breath refuses to cut off speculation that he will be. So, we're going to be watching this as it develops, but he looks to be in great shape. Got a new look. He went last year. It wasn't the long afro, but, it was certainly more than enough to grab a handful. And now he's gone to the shaved head. It's led people to speculate that he had dropped weight, and he laughed. He said, "No, I'm the same weight. It's just the haircut." And they're not doing anything on the field yet to really get a sense of where these guys are at, as we've reported. But we have a brief video going up every day from training camp that Sean and I are putting together with a quick recap for you. We hope you'll read all the stuff at shawlocal.com as well. And as we've reported, several times already, in large part because of the rules, the league monitors what these teams can do the first 4 or 5 days in training camp, and they call it the ramp-up period. And so these first 2 practices have really been glorified walkthroughs, no contact, no pads. They've only lasted about an hour and 20 minutes. But even within that, what we can see, Robert looks to be as ready as anybody else. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, Sean, but I just find this guy fascinating. I mean, he's a really good guy. He's as different as anybody I've covered in the 45 plus years I've been doing this. And he was one of the 3 or 4 best defensive players in football last year at the age of 31.
I couldn't agree more, Hub. I mean, I was going to say something to the same effect. I mean, he's one of my favorite guys that we get to talk to on this team, just because he's so reliable. And, we go through all this offseason drama, and then Robert Quinn just shows up and answers all the questions for 10 or 12 minutes, whatever it was. I mean, that's awesome. And yeah, the haircut was a little bit jarring. He said numerous people had asked him if he had lost weight, and he said, "No, man, I just cut my hair." Yeah, I mean, he reiterated it a number of times. It's out of his control, and really it is. I mean, he's under contract. He's under contract for a couple more seasons, and while he probably does want to play for a team that's going to contend, at the same time, he also said, I had 18 and a half sacks last year. I thought that would buy me some job security, and now I have to go out and reprove myself again. It's he's going to show up and do the work, and it doesn't surprise me that he's going about it that way. And he's right. He can't really control whether a trade comes about or not.
Kyle, it is a very different situation from Roquan beyond the age factor, though, because the reality is we don't know. The Bears have not been shopping him all summer because that's easy enough to find out when you talk to your sources with various teams. We know who's on the market. We know who might be available. We know when guys are being shopped heavily. And I can tell you, Robert was not shopped heavily. But that doesn't mean that the Bears aren't sitting there praying that somebody like the LA Rams is going to call and make him a Von Miller deal. Because unlike Roquan, where there is some unknown, at age 32, coming off last season, even if Quinn did it again this year, a second and third round pick, which is what the Broncos got for Von Miller, who was not playing nearly as well the last year and a half as Quinn has, would benefit the Bears more than having Quinn for another year or two, I think. And Robert Quinn seems to understand that better than most because he keeps telling us it's a business, guys. And, he said, I never expected to leave the Rams. He never expected to leave the Dolphins. I don't think he expected to leave the Cowboys, and yet here he is. So I think he's just being honest with us when he's saying that, yeah, he'd like to be here. He has gotten comfortable in Chicago. He had the best year of his career here, but he knows that it's out of his control. He probably knows it's 50-50 or better that it is going to happen, that he could get traded before the deadline. And so why worry about being here every day during the offseason and putting your best foot forward and this and that? And let's not forget, he wasn't here last summer either, leading up to the 18 and a half sack season. He's a guy who takes incredibly good care of himself. So it was one of those conversations that got started down the hill. And before you knew it, Kyle, it was kind of a snowball, raging out of control. But again, I'm happy that he's still here because he's such a class act. I expect him to get off to a very good start. I also still expect him to be dealt by the trade deadline just because of the reality of what the Bears are trying to accomplish with this rebuild.
He has to be one of the top, 4 or 5 guys coming into this season as potential trade chips for teams around the league, right? I mean, when we get into the season and teams start talking or you start seeing the speculation pop up, whether that's Adam Schefter or wherever you get your news or trade rumors for, Robert Quinn is going to be near the top of those lists when they start putting those together. I don't think he's going to be here past the trade deadline, but he seems to be embracing, the challenge right now. He's here. He's happy to be here. I was as shocked as anyone to see him on the practice field yesterday, but that bodes well for the Bears. Not only do you need his pass rush ability, but you have a lot of young kids on this team, and having someone like Robert Quinn out there on the practice field with them daily is going to do wonders for guys like Travis Gibson.
Yeah, Sean, one point that I can't remember now if it was Matt or Ryan, I think it was Flus, when asked, in a rebuilding situation, maybe it was Poles, what's the value in having, Robert Quinn? And his point was, well, what's the value in any team having an all-pro, when you're trying to develop young talent, because that's what he is. And as we've said, one thing, he's a class act. He's an easy guy to talk to. He's not real vocal. He's not a guy who's going to be making a lot of noise in the locker room, but you can just see him embracing the kids when they come to him. And I think in a lot of respects, he is a great example for some of these young players. And let's be honest, the future of the Bears pass rush right now is Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson. And Travis Gibson quietly had a much better sophomore year last year than people realize. He finished the season with 7 sacks, and he wasn't really getting a lot of snaps until Khalil Mack, went on IR, which was after week 7. And now this kid Robinson, they think they've got a diamond in the rough. What better player to have him exposed to have him behind on the depth chart, to have him watch and learn from than Robert Quinn? They're even similar body types, actually.
Yeah, and we got an interesting tidbit. You're talking about Robert's leadership. We got an interesting tidbit from Eddie Jackson today, and he said that he's been having Jaquan Brisker over to his house to watch film together. They're spending some one-on-one time, breaking it down and talking about the game. And somebody asked Eddie, you seem to be taking on more of a leadership role. Like what sparked that? And Eddie goes, well, we got rid of everybody. And it's like Eddie and Robert Quinn are two of those guys. And you could throw, I know Roquan's not been around as long as them, but you could throw him into the mix too. There's only so many guys left who have that type of experience and can give that knowledge to these younger guys. And it's nice to see a guy like Eddie Jackson, taking on that role and eagerly, taking Jaquan Brisker under his wing. And you hope that Robert can do something similar with some of those younger pass rushers.
Kyle, to Sean's point, I mean, you see Allen Robinson, James Daniels, Jimmy Graham that nobody's talking about, and then you plug in Tayshaun Gibson and Akeem Hicks and even Bilal Nichols. Now, you were 8-8 with them, and it was not going to get better. So you understand why you let them go. But as much as their performance on the field and all those guys were still performing at a high level, look at what you've lost in the locker room. And I think that is exactly the point that Sean's making there. And, so there's a lot of good reasons to look to how Eddie Jackson is going to be measured this year is pretty obvious. I mean, he's got to start taking the ball away, and he's got to be a leader out there on the football field. And you don't really have anybody on the defensive line that you can look to for that. We don't know Al-Qadim Muhammad all that well. He's a middle-aged vet at this point. And so you look to Robert Quinn, and there are plenty. And on top of everything else, and this is something I got into on the radio the other day, I think the hidden gem in this football team right now could be in the secondary. I think when you look at the talent, and now, I'm just talking about prospects. I'm not saying they're great yet. They're not. But Jalen Johnson, it was Cooper Kupp who said he was one of the two best corners he faced last year, and Cooper Kupp was the best receiver in football. Johnson has gotten better every week since he got here, and I think is expected to play at a very high level this year. We don't know what Kyler Gordon's going to be, but we know he is that kind of prospect. We don't know what Jaquan Brisker is going to be, but we know he is that kind of prospect. We know that Eddie Jackson has been a first-team All-Pro. Even got, as I recall, might have gotten an MVP vote that year, and it hasn't worked out as well since. Even Tavon Young, who came up today, or maybe it was yesterday or today, but I know Eberflus was talking about how good he's looked out there. He was considered the best nickel in football in 2019, 2018, before the injuries mounted up. And then I'm not ready to quit on there's something about Thomas Graham that really intrigues me. Not ready to quit on Kendall Vildor. There's a lot there, and what makes that look that much better is a pass rush. And so now with Robert Quinn there, and then if you plug Roquan in the middle, it isn't going to make them a playoff team, but it certainly is going to make them more competitive and pretty good on defense. And one of the best ways to support your young quarterback is to not force him to go out and get in point scoring wars. So there's just a ton of logical reasons to feel good about a guy like Quinn being here, about the need for Jackson to excel. But it's also easy to understand that what the process could lead to is you may be able to turn them into more valuable assets going forward if you have to use them as compensation.
Yeah, you should feel pretty good about the secondary. I think that's kind of something we've overlooked, and at least I have. I know we've talked about the rebuild, but you start to look at that secondary. It's in good shape in terms of the youngsters there. I see Kwai comes in. Hub Vildor is awful. Kendall Vildor deserved to be benched early last year, but Kwai, don't write off Kendall Vildor yet. See that come in there from Kwai. That kid still has some talent. Let's hope with the right coaching staff that can get back on track. But I want to make a pivot here. We were talking about veteran leadership, and kind of an underrated signing, not just because of the stability, but because of the veteran leadership with a lot of youngsters on the offensive side of the ball too. I really like the Riley Reiff signing. He's not the most polished player. He's struggled against a run throughout his career in Minnesota. I think that was kind of the undoing for him there, why they decided to move on. But he's been really good in pass protection, and is always, from what I've heard, been really well thought of in the locker room. I think that was a kind of an underrated signing, guys.
Well, I mean, it only took one visit with him yesterday to see why he would be really good in the locker room. He's a classy guy. He's an impressive guy. He's well-spoken. I think your scouting report is very good. I would add to it, most of his struggles did come on the left side. He's actually played much better on the right side, and it's a little concerning that the Bears are obviously planning on plugging him in on the left side right now, at least, although they continue to say the five best will play. And you know what, Kyle? It better be a good signing, because because if he makes the opening day roster, he's going to be your starter. And if he's your starter, he's going to make about $9 or $10 million this year. Not that that's huge money in the NFL, but on the Bears roster, it definitely is. And so, they made a real commitment to him, and it makes good sense. And again, Sean, this is about putting the main focus is finding potentially great young talent and developing it. But what I think they're beginning to show us is they think that one of the best ways to develop it is to get the right veteran players out there to help the coaches get that done. And I think Riley Reiff is a pretty good example of that. Not to mention that even with his struggles on the left side, he is still light years ahead of promising kids like Larry Borum and Braxton Jones, who, no matter how good they're going to be, still have a lot to learn. And you can't afford to get the crap beat out of Justin Fields in the process.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy with a ton of experience, a ton of starting experience. I mean, you would take him right side, left side. I don't think it really matters at this point, at least if you're the Bears and where you're at with this young offensive line, because you can plug a guy like that into your starting lineup and you're going to feel a lot better. I think they feel a lot better about their offensive line with the addition of Reiff and with the addition of Michael Schofield. And we'll see how this all shakes out in terms of the positions. But yeah, if you wind up with Reiff on the left side and you bump Borum over to the right side, I think that's a tackle situation that you could be happy about. Now, he's been a little bit, Riley Reiff just got here. He's working his way into it a little bit. He was splitting time a little bit with Braxton Jones still on that left side, but I would imagine that's going to be his once he's 100% and full go here. But yeah, Braxton Jones is still getting some looks there, and he might wind up being your backup left tackle. But there's a lot to parse through here, and we got several weeks here where we still gotta figure out what's what on this offensive line.
Yeah, I didn't mean to blow by you, by the way. I just real quick, Kendall Vildor is not awful. Kendall Vildor played pretty well towards the end of his rookie year, and that's why they made him the starter last year. He actually played pretty well the first few weeks, and then rather than awful, what happened was he got passive. It's the exact expression I've gotten from a few coaches, and you can't do that anywhere in the NFL, but particularly at cornerback. It got in his head. He got a little cautious. Physically, there is something there, and actually, after he was benched and then started to get some rotational reps as they went to a third and fourth corner later in the year, he played a little bit better again. So yeah, I'm not predicting anything spectacular for him, but he certainly is still a guy worth looking at when you talk about your depth. I mean, how many teams are actually 4 or 5 cornerbacks deep? So I think that's a reasonable report on him. The other big story from today is Tevin Jenkins, but because we have so little information on it, Kyle, I'm thinking let's hold that one for a few minutes. Are there any of our what are they? Our co-hosts? Are they our guests? Are they our listeners? Our viewers? You can be all of that, folks. Is there anybody in particular we want to get to here with some of their comments?
Well, we're getting a lot of Tevin Jenkins.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of Tevin Jenkins.
Jump into that.
Yeah.
Well, pick the best Tevin question then.
Well, it's everyone's kind of where we are. I mean, we don't have honestly.
We don't have much to say. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's just saying what's going on with Tevin Jenkins. We don't know because one, he just wasn't there. The Bears did change their schedule this year in terms of Matt Eberflus. Until this year, your head coach spoke after every practice. That's not happening every day during camp this year, and he didn't speak today. I know Luke Getsy declined to comment on any reasoning. So, I mean, we can speculate. I mean, we can go back all the way to minicamp, and I think the three of us we could probably take a victory lap here because there was a lot of people in the chat during those. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to thumb my nose at anyone, but don't read anything into it. Eberflus says everything's fine. They're just rotating guys, and I think all three of us understood they spent the 39th overall pick on Tevin Jenkins last year. It was a different regime, but when all of a sudden that was happening in minicamp, something wasn't right, and we don't know what's happening now, but I am not at all shocked to see this storyline or a storyline surrounding Tevin Jenkins pop up early in camp, guys.
Yeah, let me just deal with part of it real quick. There is some let me choose my words carefully. Let me say some debate going on right now between the media and the Bears, specifically us and the media relations folks, as to what's reasonable and what's not. And I don't want to get into it here. There's no reason to make it public. It's not like it's a crisis, and I'm not sure everybody would either care about it or understand it. But different teams release different information, but there are some bottom lines that you usually don't go below. And the frustration with this is that, the coaches can talk when they want to, and it's not up to us to judge whether that is right or wrong. But when you have a player who is already the subject of some controversy and he is suddenly absent, if they don't let us know why, it's not going to hurt anybody more than the kid, because then the speculation is going to take off. It's, as you said, it's already all over social media already. And so I went to those folks about an hour or two ago and said, guys, I know you don't want to talk about injuries. I'm not even asking if he's hurt. I'm just saying, let us know what to tell your fans as to why he didn't practice today. And quite frankly, if you don't want to tell us the truth, make something up. But there's nothing worse than for us to be sitting here and saying, well, we don't know because nobody will tell us, and so that's where we're at. I mean, that's what we've got. And hopefully the Bears will think better of that going forward, not because of anything to do with how we in the media are treated, but because I think you as fans are entitled to know. And we'll stay on that story for you. What is a bit problematic about it for us right now, guys, is those of you who do take my request and go to shawlocal.com know that my column last night, and I believe in the papers this morning before we got here, was coming out and saying for the first time that it's beginning to look like there's a chance Tevin Jenkins won't make this football team. And that's based on everything we've seen over the course of the summer, and just playing the numbers game. And now suddenly, when the numbers were challenging, you bring in Riley Reiff and Michael Schofield, and we just don't know, and it's way too early to say that. Please, I mean, he could end up the starting left tackle or starting right tackle on opening day. We're 2 days into training camp, and he missed all of last year's camp. So we don't know. But we do know that what we have seen is not promising. We know that there is nothing at all invested in him by this regime. Ryan Poles didn't draft him. Matt Eberflus wasn't asked to grade him or scout him or recommend him. And so if in fact they decide that he's not one of the 8 or 9 best, which is what they're going to keep on the offensive line, doesn't look bad for them. Looks bad for Ryan Pace, maybe Matt Nagy. That's not a reason to do it, but I'm saying that can normally be something. Not normally, it is often, Sean, what will keep coaches and GMs from pulling the trigger on a kid this quickly. But he doesn't have that safety net right now. So we are very anxious to see him back on the field. We're anxious to see him compete. Again, nothing that's happening right now really affects the offensive lineman, because without pads on, they're not really doing anything. Until they start hitting, you don't know who the 5 best or the 9 best are, and that won't start for a few more days. But when he's suddenly not on the field, it even brings into question, well, how ready is he to start hitting? So that's where we're at right now, and we're going to continue to do our best to get you all more information. Sean, I maybe I went too deep into that, but that's kind of
that's
what we
good.
know.
And just to clarify too, somebody was asking in the chat, we did not see Tevin at all. Like sometimes we'll see guys over on the exercise bikes or along the sideline. He just wasn't there today, and he was yesterday. He was participating and seemed to be having a normal day yesterday, and didn't appear to suffer any injury, at least not that we saw. He just wasn't there today, and that's really all we got at this point.
Well, one other note, Kyle, there was a point in practice yesterday. He has not been elevated from the second string since he was demoted, which was about halfway through the summer. At one point yesterday, he was running with the third string, and that appeared to be a result of these new veterans who've come in. And again, it doesn't mean anything the second day of camp in terms of who you're running with, as long as you're taking your reps. But it's also hard to ignore. And so there is a conversation developing around him that unfortunately just isn't real positive at the moment.
Yeah, it's as we said earlier, the lack of information just creates a vacuum. If there was a personal issue or and this is just the time we live in, I'm not speculating, but like if he had an illness, like that, you'd think they'd say something like that to kind of close that that echo chamber where people are going on social media and wondering and making this a bigger story than it would be. So it's very strange the way this is getting handled. Someone asked if I'm a bot in here. Clearly not a bot, but thank you for joining us, man. They said, what is the trade value for Tevin Jenkins? And guys, I don't know about you, but I doubt there's much trade value for him at this point coming off of the injury last year, right?
Well, I mean, if he can pass a physical, I don't know that the injury, it was not by everything I've been able to uncover and everything we've been told, it was not a major back surgery. And I've had 3 of them, so it's something I know a little bit about. 2 of them were major, 1 of them wasn't. And the fact that he did come back and play last season, the fact that he did participate throughout the summer, it certainly is something that a team that's going to give up something for him would want to know. He'd have to pass a physical, but there's every reason to believe that he would pass a physical. So I don't think it's that so much as I never understood how the Bears could even suggest he was going to play left tackle. He's just not that kind of prospect. You can see it as an athlete. And so when you're not going to be a swing tackle, if you're just going to be a right tackle, maybe it diminishes your value a little bit. But that said, everybody I was talking to leading up to the 2021 draft was high on this kid. Many people thought he was a steal at 39, and all those teams are still out there, and they haven't seen anything bad either because he hasn't really played. Now, just the fact that he may be available, we don't know that he is, but if he were made available, you're not getting a second-round pick for him. And because of the way it's gone and because they're pulling the trigger so quickly, again, this is all if, we don't know if any of this is going on, you're not talking day 2, but I got to believe that if he can pass a physical, that there's a team out there that would consider anywhere from a 5th to a 7th round pick. And I think a 5th at this point, if you're giving up on him, you'd be really happy with. I don't know if you could get it. But if it's not going to work out, a 6th or a 7th is better than nothing, and so my guess is that's what we're talking about, Sean, if again it even becomes a consideration.
Yeah, there's no point in burying him on your depth chart if you can get some value for him, but we don't really know where they see him, other than what we've just been talking about with him playing with the second string a little bit in the spring and again yesterday. And I would think you could get some value for him though, if that's the route that they want to go. I mean, this is still a young tackle, and he's been in the league a year, and he's hardly had any playing experience. I think somebody will give him a chance, and somebody would see some value in that, particularly once injuries start happening here in the next couple of weeks, and maybe somebody out there is going to need a right tackle and is willing to part with like you were saying, a late round pick.
So, Kyle, I think one thing we can say is I know that they were very clear, Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles in the summer when he was demoted to the second string. Don't read anything into it. We're trying to look at a lot of people. We're trying to move people around. And I know there's some truth in that because we're watching how a lot of players are getting moved back and forth. I mean, Jalen Johnson took a couple practices with the second string, but it lasted, I think, 2 or 3 practices. Now, what we can say with some certainty is at this point, this is not just motivational. I mean, that ship sailed, okay? I mean, there's something more than just needing to light a fire under him going on here. Again, what it is, until we can get someone that's willing to talk to us about it, we're only guessing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. Sticking to the offensive line, we had a question earlier about Lucas Patrick, who left today's practice with an injury. I know the Bears didn't provide an update after. Can you guys maybe give the listeners, the viewers, a little more info on what you guys saw with Lucas today?
Well, only that he walked off under his own power, I believe, with Andre Tucker, who's the trainer. I didn't see a scary limp or anything like that. But again, I mean, I know guys with bad ACL tears who don't limp, so, and I'm not saying that's what he has. I don't even know if it's a leg. We have no idea is the answer. And this again, and this is not unique to the Bears. It's just a little frustrating, especially to us older media folks who remember a different time. The Bears have said that they're not obligated by league rules to talk about injuries until the regular season starts, so they're not going to. And, And then beyond that, the fact that Matt Eberflus is only talking every other day instead of every day, I don't think there's a team in the league that lets anybody but the head coach talk about injuries. So you're not going to get it from, Luke Getsy or Alan Williams or anything like that. So all we know is that he walked off the field. Well, all I know, maybe Sean has found something else out, is that he walked off the field with the head trainer and was not seen again. And, we certainly hope that it's nothing, but we'll wait to find out more.
Yeah, we'll probably just have to see, whether he's there tomorrow, whether we see him on the bikes or along the sideline or anything. Just a note, some people were making a big deal out of it on Twitter that he had to get in the cart, but he walked off the field and he got in the cart because the practice field is a long way from Hallis Hall. That was all that was.
Were they on one of the backfields today?
Yeah, they were on a backfield today. So it was a long walk, and he did walk off the field on his own.
Yeah, fields 3 and 4 are the equivalent, I'm going to say, of about a 3 or 4 block walk back to the locker room. And even if it's not a leg injury, if a guy's hurt, why have him do that until you've been able to examine him and know what the extent? But we saw him walk to the cart in no apparent discomfort, and so to speculate would be unprofessional and unreasonable.
We during minicamp we saw Sam Mustipher play exclusively at guard, and I know today after Lucas Patrick's left practice that Doug Kramer did step in with the first team at center. Gary Ross had asked us here, why is Mustipher not considered the backup center and only Dougie Doug?
Well, first of all, I would guarantee you that Mustipher, as long as he's on the roster, is the backup center. But he's also right now the starting right guard. I think the assumption now that Michael Schofield is here is that Schofield, might have a leg up in that competition. But initially, it was Sam trading reps with Dakota Dozier. Dakota Dozier went down, and again, they won't tell us exactly, but Matt did confirm the other day with a, quote, serious knee injury. He's on injured reserve. And I don't even think he was designated injured. I don't think they have to designate him until the start of the season, actually. So they can designate him injured reserve with the option to return, but we won't know that for a while. But the reason that Kramer was out there is because Mustipher was running right next to him with the number ones at right guard. And as of now, he appears to be holding on to that position. Now, there is another way you can look at that too, which is that because they know Mustipher has been and can be their starting center, if they are concerned that this could be, miss a little bit of time for Lucas Patrick, and if Sam's going to be the starting guard, that they want to know if Kramer can play, because he and Dieter Iceland are the only other centers in camp. And so to me, it made perfect sense that it was Kramer out there running with the number ones. I do. He's interesting, Sean. Again, another local kid. I want to say Hinsdale. And most of the teams that I talked to not only didn't have him as a draft prospect, they thought maybe a free agent, but not even a priority free agent. I didn't talk to a lot of teams that they loved him as a great all effort college guy, but a lot of teams were not projecting him as an NFL player, and yet the Bears invested a draft choice. And so obviously Ryan Poles and his crew are a lot higher on him than some other teams were.
Yeah, he's small, he's small for that position, and maybe that's just part of these lighter, quicker O linemen that Ryan Poles is looking for. This could have been as simple as just getting him some reps. That's always valuable when you can get those first team reps early on as a rookie. And two, if they're making that switch to guard for Sam, get him as many reps as you can at that right guard spot. That he can play the center. They don't really need to see that out of him at this point. Especially if he's going to be potentially in that starting, with that first team at the right guard position.
I will tell you guys, one thing that's very interesting about Kramer, his teammate, I want to say his first couple of years, was Nick Allegretti at Illinois. And Nick was another guy who played center there and was not projected to make the leap to the NFL, ended up a free agent in Kansas City, and has developed into a very good NFL 6th or 7th offensive lineman. He's a key part of that offensive line. He has started some games, but he's become an invaluable swing guy, backup center and guard, and they may see some of the same thing in Kramer. I know I talked to him, and they said that they were actually pretty good friends until Nick graduated and went on to the NFL. Nick's dad Carl is a dear friend and a really class act, great family, and so I think that may be some of what the Bears see in the possibilities for Kramer.
Nick's a Lincoln Way East guy like me, and actually one of my cousins played with him for a year or two, I believe.
I almost made the mistake and said he was a Sycamore guy because there's
he's a Lincoln Way East guy.
Yeah,
he's a Griffin.
Kansas City, I want to say, has a linebacker from Sycamore. I'm blanking out on the name right now.
I didn't even realize that Sean was a what you call it? What was the
Griffin?
What's the team name? Griffin. Yeah, it's but I knew you're South Side boys, and so coming from a dyed-in-the-wool North Sider.
Ben Neiman. I had to look that up, Kyle. Ben Neiman is the Sycamore.
Ben Neiman's a pretty good football player. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's logged some pretty good minutes for them. As a matter of fact, I think he was even starting for a good part of last year.
I believe his brother's in the league too, if I remember right. I could be wrong about that, but I'm sidetracking us.
I know
here.
His brother was at Iowa as well.
Yeah. So Gary followed up there. We kind of hit on it here. I'll throw this up. Schofield will be right guard, and where does Sam go then? And I bring that up because a frequent viewer here, and we enjoy having you, Sam. Sam Rush said, I know is one of the guys that really dislikes Sam Mustipher, that said Sam Mustipher is not going to make the 53-man roster. And I think we're all three going to disagree with that, right? But I guess the question does become, we're talking about 8 to 9 guys. Maybe this is a good place to end it. If we get near an hour here and we bring in these new offensive linemen and we wonder about Tevin Jenkins, let's start to try and game this out a little bit here, guys. I mean, Sean, I'll start with you. If you had to guess, what do you think this offensive line looks at? Let's say let's not worry about week one of week one of the regular season. Let's talk about that first preseason game. What do you think that first preseason game you're looking at for an offensive line, assuming guys play?
Yeah, I mean, if everyone's playing and everyone's healthy, I think you got Riley Reiff on the left tackle, Cody Whitehair, Lucas Patrick, assuming he's healthy, is going to be at that center spot. And I mean, I still lean towards, Michael Schofield was brought here for a reason. He's a veteran with a ton of experience. He's probably going to be in that right guard spot, and Larry Borum at right tackle. That seems to me to be the direction that this is heading. I think Sam Mustipher, to go back to the question, he would be a valuable backup if he can play guard or center. He could fit into any one of those spots, and that alone is probably going to keep him on the roster.
Yeah, I think Sean is probably spot on, guys, because at the end of the day, if Sam is not the starting right guard, then him and Kramer are competing for the same spot on the roster, and Sam is just a much better football player, and Kramer would probably fairly easily get to the practice squad. There's no way that Sam would. And I will add that somebody who I respect tremendously tells me that we're all underrating him, and he thinks Mustipher is going to hang on to the starting right guard spot. So what you're doing is you're comparing a potential starter to a guy who's potentially the 53rd man on the roster. Well, who's going to win that battle? So I'd be pretty surprised at this point. And again, because Sam, he's not just a backup center. He was much better than what Gary and some other folks might think. He was an average NFL center, very smart, very good with the line calls. He had some rough times because he was undersized. He's never going to be Jay Hilgenberg or Roland Kreutz, but he's a better football player than a lot of Bears fans give him credit for. So I think at this point, and let's not forget that the Bears gave him a tender. I mean, he was an exclusive, he was a restricted free agent, and the Bears could have let him walk. They let everybody else walk, but they hung on to Sam.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
a good
obviously
point.
This regime sees something there too.
Yeah, I think you made a couple good points there. One, they did tender him, and two, Doug Kramer, while I think there's some potential there long term for him, he's not going to be ready to play early. And he can't.
He's also, I don't mean to interrupt. He's also never going to play guard. And so at least with Sam, you got a swing man. I'm sorry.
You're going to be able to get Doug Kramer through to the practice squad, almost certainly. So at least to start the year, I think Sam Mustipher would be one of those 8 or 9 guys. He's just too valuable in terms of the positionality of being able to play both guard and center. I will say, I wonder, and it does sound like Riley Reiff wants to play the left side. Sean, you think that's where they'll start him at? Hub, I don't know about you, but I'm of the mindset that I would put Larry Borum at left and put Riley Reiff on the right side.
I've seen flashes and have the sense that Borum can play left tackle. He is surprised with his athleticism. I think he can also be very good at right tackle. And I don't know if you're not pushing it a little bit to try and ask him to play on the left side. But I think the other thing you can't underrate, they like Braxton Jones. He continued to take all the first team reps today at left tackle. Now, eventually, Reiff's going to step in there, but Reiff has lined up exclusively on the left side in the 2 days that he's been here. So that does appear to be the plan. And, the missing link here, guys, is how are you supporting Justin Fields? Because, we've now spent, I think, our last 2 podcasts without talking about the guy who commands the most attention of anybody on this roster. He's the future. He's what everything's being built around. And we spent a good part of the summer, you guys were pulling hair out. I didn't have any left for that, but over, what they have not done to support him. And now you bring in these couple veteran linemen. And I think what they're telling us is we think we've got something in Braxton Jones, and maybe in 2023 or worst case 24, he's going to be our starting left tackle. But I don't know how they can be comfortable going day one against Nick Bosa and putting Braxton Jones out there when you've got the option of Riley Reiff and you're trying to keep Justin Fields healthy for 17 weeks. So even though it's not his best position in my estimation, he may still be the best left tackle on the Bears right now. And that's why I agree with Sean. I do think he's going to probably be starting the season, Reiff that is, at left tackle.
Did we just go 59 minutes without mentioning Justin Fields?
We did. I thought we were going to be almost
wow.
there. We just crossed over an hour. I mean,
that's how you know it's busy.
Yeah, pop a bottle of champagne. We got away from some Justin Fields talk for a while.
We got lots of other news going on.
I'll tell you what was more impressive than that, though, guys, because we can do whatever we want. But I think I had this in my column the other day. At the season opening press conference, because of the way things fell, Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus went 19 questions in 15 minutes without talking about Justin Fields, which, I mean, to me, they had a better chance of winning the Super Bowl than they did doing that, And so I can promise you that by the time we get to San Francisco the Sunday after Labor Day, we're going to be talking plenty about Justin Fields. But maybe it's even an interesting note that's how much things have changed. There's no Andy Dalton or Nick Foles to talk about. There's no question who the starting quarterback is. There's no period of development anymore. It's him, and everybody knows that now. And so I think right now we're looking at other things that are more unknown. And as they put the pads on, and as you get into a couple preseason games, then I think we'll start to hear a lot more about Justin with a lot more of the focus on him.
Talking about pads and preseason games, Gary had a follow-up talking about offensive line, still asking about Carter and Thomas, what we think of them. I mean, we're already kind of running out of time. I want to wrap it up here. But Gary asked us that question another week, and then maybe even another week after that, as these guys get the pads on, it'd be a lot easier to start to understand where these youngsters are.
Yeah, I will tell you quickly, Sean, I don't know if you caught this or not, but about halfway through practice today, Jatara Carter got in with the ones at the left guard spot, actually. What am I saying? Yeah, because Sam Mustipher was out there at the same time. No, I'm sorry. He went in at the right guard spot, and I think Sam did move over to center for a couple, whatever it was. And it was. I think it was 3 reps. And Angelo Blackson embarrassed him on the first one, shamed him on the second one, destroyed him on the third one, and Chris Morgan took him back out. And it's not a comment. The kid's a really interesting prospect and athlete, a classic target for the practice squad. Anxious to get to know him and see more of what he can do. But that's a guy you don't have to worry about being a factor till at least next year.
Sorry, I thought you were good.
No, Hub hit it on the head there with Jatari. We'll see him more in the future.
We got maybe a first timer here. I don't think I've seen this name, and I want to end it on a nice high note here because I've taken more than my fair share of shots at Cole Kmet. I feel like over the last year, Jeffrey Bricker said, "Sounds like Cole Kmet had a good day, guys." How about that?
Well, he had one really, really nice catch right up the middle in traffic with Justin Fields threw it to him. It was in 7-on-7, not with everybody out there, but it was the timing was beautiful. And he said afterwards, and it showed that was the type of play that they've been working on all off season. And, Cole's talked to us about, those types of plays and there were some times he goes back and looks at the film and sometimes his timing was just off with Justin in some key spots, looking at some red zone opportunities and places he could have scored a touchdown. And And you can see already that maybe that timing is getting a little bit better here. And they seem to be on the same page, and there's reason to be excited about that Cole Kmet and Justin Fields connection.
Yeah, the particular play that Sean's talking about was a true tight end seam splitter. The play that we don't know that he can make on a consistent basis, even if he does become a very dependable tight end. And it was fun to watch. And often these practices and these camps get measured in which plays draw the biggest crowd response. And that one set off. If you weren't watching, you turned your head quickly because it happened where the media is. Yeah, I'll only describe it because you can't picture it anyway, as we're kind of on the field on the right. It happened on the field on the left. I was actually watching the offensive lineman down in front of me, and as soon as I heard the roar, I turned to look and see what had happened. Cole Kmet, I'm surprised, Kyle, because I never noticed that you'd really been all that hard on him. I mean, maybe you haven't been happy at the pace he's developing, but I'm high on Cole Kmet. I talked about this. Tight ends are notoriously slower developers than most other positions in the NFL, and even the great ones, it wasn't until year 2 and in many cases year 3. And I think this is going to be his year, because if you take a look back, he had very respectable numbers for a second-year tight end last year, other than the touchdowns. He's talked about it. He has not become a red zone factor, but other than that, I think it was over 600 yards and like 62 catches or something like that, which is pretty good stuff for a second-year tight end. So I'm very encouraged about what he might show us this year.
Yeah, I typically am the guy that cautions slow your roll on young tight ends, that it takes a while. I think maybe I was being strong with my wording there. I think my take last year was that for what you expected out of Cole Kmet and what you really need for this offensive flourish is you need to see some more explosive plays, and that really goes for this Bears offense in general. And that would probably, or I shouldn't say, there's a good chance that was a symptom of the dysfunctionality of this offense last year. But you'd like to see some more big chunk plays from Cole Kmet. And obviously, as you mentioned, no touchdowns. They need to get him more involved in the red zone. But, if you get that, if you get that trend, you'll feel a lot better about this rebuild. If Justin Fields and Cole Kmet become a special duo, that puts you on a pretty good path for this offense going forward.
Alrighty, guys. I have been here since 7:30 this morning. Not that anybody cares, and I'm now about to miss my deadline for the papers, which is going to make Kyle very unhappy.
We were doing this. I got it.
No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to miss it by much, I promise. We need to put a wrap on this one. Sean and I have still got to file for the papers, and we really appreciate all of you joining us. Guys, it's fun. It's great. The Bears are back in camp. The NFL season is here. The good stuff is just about to heat up, and nobody's going to cover it for you better than we do. So please keep an eye on those Twitter accounts. Again, it's at Sean_Hammond. It's at Kyle Nabors. It's at Hub_Arkush. We love having you all join us as we record these. If you prefer just to have it as a podcast to listen to at your leisure whenever you feel like it, go to the App Store or iTunes and download a subscription to it. You can do that at shawlocal.com. We're going to have at least one, maybe even sometimes more for you every week as training camp goes on. As we get the schedule settled out, we'll try and lock it into a certain time. But if you watch those Twitter accounts, you'll get plenty of notice. And stay at shawlocal.com. Sean and I, and occasionally Kyle, are now filing multiple pieces as news breaks. So if you want to set everything you need to know out of Bears training camp, shawlocal.com is the place for you to be. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll be back to talk at you again next week from Lake Forest.